So deep inside your stomach, immersed in this highly corrosive pool of acid, there's a very specific protein sequence. And its entire job is basically just to stop your body from digesting itself.
Right. It's essentially a biological shield.
Exactly. But now you've got biohackers, weekend warriors, and even professional athletes synthesizing that exact microscopic sequence. And they're just injecting it directly into torn muscles and ruptured tendons.
Which sounds completely wild.
Right. They're claiming it accelerates healing in like a fraction of the normal time.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like science fiction. But that transition, taking a protective gastric mechanism and trying to force a knee or, a shoulder to adopt it, it's actually driving one of the most intense, highly debated corners of modern recovery science right now.
It really is. So for today's deep dive, we are focusing on a comprehensive guide and analysis by Nikki Chase. This is from Era Organics, and it's all about a compound called BPC-157.
Yeah, you've probably heard it whispered about in gym locker rooms.
Oh, for sure. Or like heavily promoted on biohacking forums.
Yeah.
But our mission today isn't just to list off the claims about this so-called Wolverine-like healing accelerator.
Right, because there's a lot of hype.
There is so much hype. We are going to separate the biological facts from a very prevalent gray market fiction.
Right.
We really want to equip you to understand exactly what you're looking at if you ever encounter this compound.
Yeah, you have to balance that massive promise of rapid tissue recovery against the sobering reality of unregulated science.
Definitely. Okay, let's unpack this. What exactly is the biological blueprint of this compound? Like when we say BPC-157, what are we fundamentally dealing with here?
So BPC stands for body protection compound. It is a synthetic peptide.
A peptide, right?
Yeah, peptides are essentially just short chains of amino acids, which are the building blocks of proteins. But the defining characteristic of BPC-157 is really its origin.
Right, back to the stomach acid thing.
Exactly. Researchers isolated a highly specific sequence of 15 amino acids from those naturally occurring protective proteins that are just found in human gastric juice.
So it's essentially a biological copy-paste.
Yeah.
We're taking the stomach's built-in repair kit, replicating it in a lab, and then trying to apply it to an injury somewhere else.
That's the idea.
But, I mean, if I tear a ligament in my elbow, how does a stomach peptide actually pull off a repair at the cellular level?
Well, it operates by manipulating a few primary mechanisms that dictate structural repair in the body. The most prominent one is the promotion of angiogenesis.
Angiogenesis.
Yeah, this is the biological process of forming entirely new blood vessels from pre-existing ones. Injured tissues, especially ligaments and tendons, they notoriously struggle to heal because they lack sufficient blood supply.
Right, they just don't get enough blood.
Exactly. So BPC-157 stimulates the endothelial cells to sort of sprout and branch out, meaning it actively builds new microvascular supply lines directly to the damaged muscle fibers and connective tissues.
Oh, wow. So think of it like a city planner suddenly building a brand new direct 6-lane highway straight to a construction site.
That's a great way to look at it.
Instead of crucial repair materials getting bottlenecked in local traffic, the oxygen and nutrients can just bypass all the congestion and get dumped exactly where the body needs the most.
Yeah, and that infrastructure upgrade is exactly what sets the stage for the next phase. Once those new blood vessels deliver that rush of oxygen and nutrients, the peptide then upregulates fibroblast activity.
Wait, fibroblasts?
Yeah, fibroblast. It essentially kicks your body's collagen factories into overdrive. Fibroblasts require a massive amount of energy and raw materials to synthesize new collagen.
Okay, so with more materials arriving via your new 6-lane highway, the localized connective tissue just gets rebuilt much faster.
Exactly. It has the supplies it needs now.
Building the roads and hiring more construction workers, I mean, that makes total sense. But the source also mentions it regulates nitric oxide signaling, right? And reduces localized inflammation.
It does, yes.
It specifically cites lowering inflammatory markers, like interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha.
And those markers are really crucial to understand. You can think of interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha as the chemical alarm bells. They're what cause swelling and pain at an injury site.
Right, which we usually want to avoid.
Well, some inflammation is necessary, but an overactive response stalls the rebuilding phase. So BPC-157 basically chemically muffles those bells. It modulates the nitric oxide pathway, which controls how blood vessels dilate and constrict to optimize circulation while simultaneously suppressing those specific inflammatory cytokines.
So it's building the scaffolding, rushing in the supplies, and actively putting out the localized chemical fires all at the exact same time.
That's what the preclinical data suggests, yes.
I mean, a highway to an injury sounds incredible in theory. But we have to look at what happens when this biological traffic is actually directed to a real physical injury. The reported benefits in the source material, they really span from tendons to tummies.
They do. Let's examine the musculoskeletal claims first, because the timeline here is usually what grabs people's attention.
For sure.
In preclinical models, and I want to stress that word preclinical because it carries a massive amount of weight that we'll address later. But in preclinical models, the recovery speed is pretty unprecedented. Controlled animal models have actually demonstrated tendon strength recovery within just 14 to 28 days.
Wait, 14 to 28 days? For a tendon?
Yeah.
That is staggering. I mean, tendons are essentially just the rubber bands connecting muscle to bone. And because of that poor blood supply we just talked about, they usually take months to fully repair.
Right, and that poor blood supply is the exact bottleneck that BPC-157 bypasses. But it's not just about speed, it is about the structural integrity of the repair, too.
How so?
Well, BPC-157 shows tremendous promise in promoting type I collagen synthesis. Connective tissue has different types of collagen, but type I is the primary structural component of tendons.
Oh, okay.
It's dense, it's heavily cross-linked, and it's built for tension. By accelerating the production of this specific collagen variant, the resulting tendon-to-bone healing is vastly more stable. It displays improved load-bearing capacity.
That is a total game changer for severe, highly disruptive injuries, like, an Achilles tendon rupture or a rotator cuff repair.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it builds ultra-strong type I collagen for an Achilles. But then the source material pivots entirely back to the gut.
Right, back to its origins.
Because it originates from a gastric protein, it apparently stabilizes the stomach lining, protects against ulcers, and strengthens tight junction proteins to prevent leaky gut conditions. Let's break that down for a second. Tight junction proteins are literally the cellular mortar that keeps the bricks of your stomach lining sealed shut against stomach acid, right?
They are the gatekeepers, yeah. When tight junctions weaken, undigested food particles and bacteria can slip through the intestinal wall and get into the bloodstream.
Which is really bad.
It's very bad. It triggers systemic inflammation. BPC-157 seems to reinforce that cellular mortar, restoring the barrier integrity of the entire gastrointestinal tract.
I have to pause and look at this logically, though. We're talking about a single compound healing a torn Achilles tendon in a limb and then turning around and curing an ulcer in the stomach.
I know, it sounds...
That sounds a little too close to snake oil, honestly. How does one isolated peptide sequence manage to do two completely different jobs in two completely different physiological environments?
What's fascinating here is that at the microscopic level, tissue repair relies on the exact same fundamental processes, regardless of the organ in question.
Wait, really?
Yeah. It all boils down to cellular signaling and blood flow. In a torn Achilles, that increased microvascular blood flow and the resulting fibroblast activity rebuild the dense connective tissue.
Okay.
And in the gut, those exact same regenerative signaling pathways and microvascular repairs work to restore surface integrity to the delicate epithelial cells of the stomach lining.
Oh, I see.
It's the identical set of biological tools. They're simply being applied to a different construction site in the body. The mechanism itself is universally applicable.
That's wild. But, if this biological scaffolding is so universally effective in tissue repair, my physical therapist should be handing it out like candy.
You would think so.
A compound that accelerates type I collagen and universally upgrades the body's repair signaling should be the standard of care for every single sports injury. Why is this relegated to gym locker rooms and, obscure biohacking forums?
Well, this is where we run headfirst into the glaring limitations of the evidence. BPC-157 is strictly classified by both the FDA in the United States and the European Medicines Agency as a research compound.
A research compound?
Yes, it is absolutely not an approved medical treatment for any condition.
Meaning it is entirely experimental and any application outside laboratory is totally off-label and unapproved.
Correct. And the regulatory hesitation really comes down to a severe, almost singular data problem.
What kind of problem?
Well, the source highlights a major systematic review analyzing the existing literature on BPC-157. Out of 36 primary studies evaluated, 35 of them were animal studies, specifically involving rats and beagle dogs.
Rats and dogs. Okay.
Or they were in vitro studies, meaning they were conducted on isolated cell cultures in a petri dish.
Wait, 35 out of 36?
Yes. And perhaps the most critical takeaway from the source material is this fact right here. As of February 2026, there are 0 published, peer-reviewed, randomized controlled trials of BPC-157 in humans for any indication. None.
0.
Wow.
We are talking about the literal gold standard for medical science, the randomized controlled trial, which is the only way to definitively prove efficacy and safety in human biology, and it just does not exist.
It doesn't, and it actually gets significantly more concerning when you look at who is actually conducting the animal research that we do have.
Oh.
There's a massive red flag in the scientific community regarding the existing data. It's something we can refer to as the Zagreb anomaly.
The Zagreb anomaly.
Yeah. The vast majority of the published foundational studies on BPC-157 originate from a single research group at the University of Zagreb in Croatia.
Just one group.
Just one. There is a severe, almost total lack of independent replication by other laboratories globally.
Oh, man. That is like looking up a restaurant on Yelp, seeing 50 glowing 5-star reviews, and then, realizing they were all written from the exact same IP address by the chef's mom.
That's a perfect analogy.
It doesn't definitively prove the food is bad, but you absolutely want a second opinion from an independent food critic before you actually eat there.
Exactly. That skepticism is entirely warranted in the scientific method. Without independent replication across different labs with different methodologies, confidence in those glowing 14-day recovery timelines just plummets.
Yeah, I'd imagine so.
Furthermore, there was an attempt to test this in humans once. A phase I human safety trial involving 42 volunteers was officially registered back in 2015.
Oh, really? And what did the data show?
We have no idea.
What do you mean?
The trial was mysteriously canceled, the results were never published, and no public explanation was ever provided to the scientific community. So the basic, vetted safety data from a controlled human study simply evaporated.
A canceled trial with 42 volunteers and zero transparency. That is exactly the kind of detail that should immediately put the brakes on human consumption.
You would think so.
But the lack of human trials clearly hasn't stopped people from trying to get their hands on this stuff, which brings us to a highly dangerous underground market.
Right, because there is no FDA oversight. Procuring BPC-157 online is just a massive biological gamble. You are entering an unregulated gray market where product quality varies wildly.
It's just rolling the dice.
Exactly. According to the guide, price ranges for these vials span anywhere from $20 to $300. The premium suppliers might claim 98 to 99% purity, often providing third-party testing certificates, but the cheaper gray market vials can test as low as 5% to 75% pure.
Okay, let's do the math on that for a second. If I'm buying a vial that is only 5% pure BPC-157, that means I'm injecting 95% mystery liquid directly into my bloodstream.
Unfortunately, yes.
What kind of chemical byproducts are we actually talking about here? Buying unregulated peptides is like downloading a software update for your body from a random pop-up ad on the internet. You might get the fix, or you might get a biological virus.
And the virus in this case can be fatal. Unregulated vials are frequently contaminated with endotoxins, heavy metals, and completely unknown chemical byproducts resulting from incomplete peptide synthesis in these subpar labs.
Heavy metals. Yikes.
Yeah. Injecting bacterial byproducts from these contaminated products can trigger life-threatening sepsis. Sterility is a massive, immediate concern. A simple lapse in manufacturing protocols, or even just using expired reconstituted peptides, can lead to severe, localized necrosis and systemic infection.
Okay, so that covers the fake or the heavily contaminated stuff. But let's assume, just for a second, that someone sources the purest possible 99% BPC-157. What are the actual biological risks of introducing the real peptide into a human body without any medical supervision?
Even then, the physiological risks of the pure compound are notable. Common side effects reported include nausea, particularly when individuals use oral doses ranging from 100 to 500 micrograms a day to target gastrointestinal issues.
Okay, nausea makes sense.
For those opting to inject it subcutaneously, localized pain, redness, or a hardening of the tissue at the injection site is frequently reported.
Right.
But structurally, there are anecdotal reports of distinct blood pressure fluctuations, both sharp spikes and sudden drops, immediately following administration.
Really? Why does it affect blood pressure?
This happens because the peptide directly interacts with that nitric oxide system we discussed earlier, which is the primary mechanism the body uses to regulate the dilation of blood vessels.
So if it manipulates the cardiovascular system to that degree, the complete lack of long-term human trials becomes genuinely terrifying. I mean, if we don't have 5 or 10-year longitudinal studies, we have absolutely no idea how this alters our biology down the road.
The regulatory bodies agree with you completely. The FDA actually classified BPC-157 in Category 2 for bulk drug substances and they issued a very specific warning about immunogenicity.
Immunogenicity. Explain how that actually works in this context.
Immunogenicity is the potential for a substance to provoke an immune response. Because BPC-157 is a synthetic, laboratory-created peptide sequence, your immune system's macrophages and T cells might just fail to recognize it as friendly.
So they see it as an invader.
Exactly. They tag the synthetic structure as a foreign antigen, much like a virus.
Right.
The immune system then launches a targeted inflammatory attack against the peptide, essentially making your body allergic to the treatment.
Oh, wow.
This raises the risk of abnormal systemic immune reactions that can be incredibly difficult to reverse once they start.
So wait, you were trying to put out an inflammatory fire in your shoulder, and you might accidentally trigger an immune system wildfire across your entire body.
Precisely. It's a huge risk. But perhaps the most alarming theoretical risk ties directly back to its primary mechanism of action.
Which was the angiogenesis.
Right, because BPC-157 is so ruthlessly effective at promoting angiogenesis, growing those new blood vessel supply lines, there is a highly credible medical concern regarding cancer.
Cancer.
Yes, if malignant cancer cells or an undiagnosed microtumor are already present somewhere in the body, this peptide does not discriminate. It could theoretically accelerate that tumor's growth by supplying it with a dense, brand new network of blood vessels, literally feeding the malignancy.
That is a staggering implication. You inject this hoping to shave a month off a rotator cuff recovery, and you might accidentally feed an undiagnosed tumor.
It's a very real theoretical possibility.
With risks that severe, it makes total sense that this is heavily restricted in professional sports.
Oh, it is entirely prohibited. The World Anti-Doping Agency, WADA, bans BPC-157 at all times, both in and out of competition.
No exceptions.
None. It falls under their S0 category, which serves as a blanket ban for unapproved experimental substances. It isn't even eligible for a therapeutic use exemption under any medical circumstance.
Wow.
The source material actually highlights a very sobering anecdote of a professional combat sports athlete who was handed a full 2-year suspension after testing positive.
2 years? That's career-ending for some guys.
It is. His career was derailed simply because he trusted a gray market supplier who falsely assured him the peptide was WDO compliant.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If you look at the sheer scale of the risks, potential tumor growth, systemic immune reactions, 2-year career-ending suspensions, and the literal heavy metal poisoning from injecting 95% mystery liquid, why is this market absolutely booming? Why are professional athletes and everyday gym goers risking their long-term health for an experimental stomach peptide?
This raises an important question about the profound psychology of injury and recovery. When people are trapped in chronic, unyielding pain or, when millions of dollars in athletic contracts are on the line, desperation fundamentally rewires how we assess risk.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
A severe physical injury doesn't just take away your mobility. It strips away your identity, your livelihood, and your daily quality of life. When an athlete in that highly vulnerable, desperate state reads an anecdotal report of a miraculous 14-day tendon recovery, the immediate perceived reward suddenly eclipses all of the massive, unseen risks of unregulated exposure.
The desperation is just the engine that makes the gray market so profitable. If people weren't in pain, they wouldn't be rolling the dice on a $30 vial of unknown chemicals.
Exactly.
So if you are listening to this right now and you are dealing with a stubborn injury, how do you actually facilitate real biological recovery without playing games with unregulated peptides?
Well, the source material draws a direct comparison between BPC-157 and evidence-based alternatives, and the contrast in clinical confidence is stark.
Like what?
For example, traditional physical therapy carries a profoundly high level of clinical evidence for musculoskeletal recovery. Yes, it operates on a much slower timeline of 4 to 24 weeks, depending on the severity of the tissue damage, and it requires grueling commitment. But the risk profile is virtually non-existent when supervised by a professional.
And crucially, physical therapy doesn't cost $300 a vial for a substance that might give you heavy metal poisoning. What about the medical interventions that are actually proven?
There is platelet-rich plasma, or PRP therapy. This procedure involves drawing your own blood, spinning it down to concentrate the platelets, and injecting those healing factors directly into the injury.
Right, I've heard of that.
It boasts moderate clinical evidence, though it can be cost-prohibitive, ranging from $500 to $2,000 per session. And for immediate acute symptom control, traditional NSAIDs like ibuprofen offer extensive, highly vetted clinical evidence for reducing pain and inflammation in the short term.
But the most valuable part of the guide from Era Organics isn't just the comparison of treatments. It actually lays out an ultimate beginner's protocol. It's an 8-step, purely physiological recovery plan that any injured person should exhaust entirely before ever letting the word peptide cross their mind.
It's very thorough.
And looking closely at it, the protocol is just a blueprint for giving your body the exact raw materials it needs to execute its own angiogenesis and collagen synthesis naturally.
That's the beauty of it. It focuses entirely on optimizing the body's endogenous systems. The foundational step is maximizing sleep quality, specifically achieving 7 to 9 hours of uninterrupted sleep every single night.
Explain the mechanism there. We all know sleep is good, but how does it specifically repair a torn tendon?
It happens during the deepest stages of sleep, known as slow-wave sleep. This is when the pituitary gland releases the vast majority of the body's natural human growth hormone. This hormone directly stimulates tissue growth, cell reproduction, and regeneration. If you are surviving on 4 or 5 hours of sleep, you are repeatedly short-circuiting that slow-wave cycle. You are biologically starving your body of its own primary healing mechanism.
And you can't build something out of nothing, which brings us to nutrition. The protocol strictly recommends consuming 1.6 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight.
That specific ratio is critical for maintaining a positive nitrogen balance in the body. You literally cannot build that ultra-strong type I collagen we discussed earlier if you do not consume the specific amino acid building blocks required to synthesize it.
Right.
The protocol also pairs that protein intake with vitamin C, zinc, and magnesium. Vitamin C, for instance, acts as a mandatory cofactor for the enzymes that stabilize and cross-link collagen fibers. Without it, the structural integrity of the newly formed tissue remains incredibly weak.
Another crucial mechanism in this 8-step protocol involves how we manage the inflammatory response. The guide explicitly recommends applying interventions like ice, compression, or NSAIDs only during the acute phase, which is defined as the first 3 to 7 days after the injury occurs.
Yes, that is key.
After that 1-week window, you have to back off and avoid long-term suppression of inflammation.
This is a very common mistake people make. Chronic, months-long inflammation is indeed harmful and degrades tissue. But acute inflammation, that initial swelling and heat in the first week, is the precise biological signal that forces the body to send blood flow, macrophages, and repair cells to the injury site.
So you need it early on.
Exactly. If you suppress that crucial signal for weeks on end by constantly popping heavy anti-inflammatories, you disrupt the body's natural healing cascade. You essentially turn off the siren before the fire trucks have a chance to arrive at the emergency.
Jumping straight to injecting an unverified, gray market experimental peptide while surviving on 4 hours of sleep a night, ignoring your protein intake, and completely skipping your physical therapy sessions. I mean, that is exactly like pouring premium high-octane racing fuel into a car that has 4 flat tires and a blown transmission.
That's such a perfect way to put it.
You have to fix the absolute biological basics before you look for a chemical shortcut.
Knowledge is most valuable when it is deeply understood and applied in the correct biological order. The incredibly unglamorous, often frustrating truth is that ruthless consistency in your sleep hygiene, precise nutritional support, and progressive physical rehabilitation will always outperform a quick, unverified, and potentially dangerous fix.
Okay, let's bring all these threads together. We started this deep dive examining a compound heavily romanticized as a Wolverine-like healing accelerator. And when you look closely at the biology, BPC-157 features absolutely fascinating cellular mechanisms.
It really does.
Pushing the body to build new blood vessels, upregulating fibroblast activity, and rapidly accelerating the production of type I collagen. The preclinical data for tissue repair in animal models is genuinely incredible.
The biological potential is absolutely undeniable. But as we've laid out, those incredible mechanisms are currently entirely overshadowed by a severe, glaring lack of human trials.
Yeah.
The research landscape is heavily skewed by the dominance of a single laboratory, It's marred by canceled safety studies, and it's overshadowed by a highly dangerous, unregulated gray market saturated with contaminated products.
It's a mess.
The health risks, ranging from life-threatening sepsis to severe immunogenicity and the theoretical acceleration of tumor growth, they are simply too significant to ignore.
It is a classic paradigm of modern biohacking.
Hmm.
The cellular science is incredibly promising, but the medical reality is incredibly premature, which leaves us with a brand new and frankly somewhat unsettling thought to ponder based on this entire journey.
It really changes how you view your own biology.
Exactly. If a tiny sequence of 15 amino acids, derived directly from the protective protein swirling around in our own stomach acid, holds the hypothetical potential to rapidly rebuild a ruptured Achilles tendon, it really makes you wonder what other incredible, completely dormant biological sequences are currently just hiding inside our own organs, waiting to be isolated.
We are walking around with an entire universe of undiscovered biological tools inside of us.
Right. And as bioengineering advances rapidly enough to find and synthesize those hidden tools, will we eventually reach a tipping point where the sprawling gray market consistently outpaces the speed of traditional clinical trials? Are we entering an era of recovery science where injured people will constantly be forced to choose between the cutting-edge, experimental hope sold on the internet and the frustratingly slow, verified safety of the medical establishment?
The tension between that deeply human desire to heal instantly and the strict scientific necessity of proving long-term safety is only going to intensify as these microscopic discoveries accelerate.
So, what does this all mean for you? Hopefully, it means getting a much better night's sleep tonight, eating your protein, maintaining a strict commitment to your physical therapy, and utilizing a much smarter, safer approach the next time you find yourself battling a stubborn injury. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.